forgot to start my recording, for God's sake. So, okay. Okay. All right. So I'm Bill Gerber, one of the board members for the AHCF. We are introducing, and a lot of us have known her, Alice Belgrade. She's our guest speaker today, who is a board certified behavioral analyst and licensed clinical professional counselor. So big mouthful right there. Congratulations, Alice. Okay. Her experience spans more than 25 years in the field of education and behavior analysis. She has also attended many AHCF family meetings as a guest speaker on behavior. The first half of this webinar will be a presentation covering behavioral issues AHC parents deal with, followed by a lot of question and answers with parents and caregivers or whoever's on the phone. Okay? Feel free to ask Alice and stop at any time. I'm going to mute everybody just to make sure that we don't hear background, but feel free to stop Alice to talk about any specific slide that she's talking about. Anything that has to do with a child-specific situation that you want to ask Alice personally, we're just going to wait to the end of the presentation to ask specific questions for the child. Okay? Everybody good?
Good.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
There is a chat room. I will tell you right now, there is a chat room that I will chat back, and I will write test in it right now. It should pop up on everybody's screen somewhere. You can type me messages, and we can ask some things. But you should be able to hear everything. There is a conference call number to call into. There is a screen share if you logged in on your computer to listen and see on the screen. And Alice will have a series of slides.
Okay, and if you keep seeing this red line, I don't know what it is. It keeps popping up, but I'm gonna ignore it. Hello everybody. I want to talk about, obviously this huge topic is behavior. I'm gonna run through some slides to give a background so that we all understand where we're coming from. And we have a common language and a common understanding so that we then can apply the specific techniques in a way that makes sense and that you can generalize to your specific problem. So I'm going to get started right away. And some of these slides I'm going to go through really, really quickly. It's okay. They will be published to the site, the AHC site. And some of them I will be talking more extensively about and giving you examples and even showing a few videos. If you have any questions for clarification, please feel free, but I'm going to try to run through this quickly so we can get to your questions. All right. So the first thing I want to introduce is I want you to understand my interpretation of how to understand behavior in general. And that is, here's my little talk. If you were a teacher and you had a kindergarten class or a first grade class now, and you had a bunch of books in the middle of the room, you told the kids, all right, everybody, I want you to read these books. Now, none of the children have ever been taught to read. And the children just sit there. Maybe they leaf through the books, they don't read it. Would a teacher ever, or a parent for that matter, ever say, you're not reading those books. That's not okay. Time out for you. And put the child in the corner. Now, I want you to think about your behavior. I want you to think about the fact that you didn't read those books. And when you're ready to read, you join in. Would we ever do that? Of course not. It's ridiculous. However, when it comes to behavior, we do have that expectation that a child's going to behave well. And when they don't behave well, then we run to punishment as our teaching method. So the point here is that behavior is a skill like anything else. It's a skill like reading. It's a skill like putting on your clothes, cooking, anything else that you might do. And so this whole webinar, it's going to be based on a philosophy that you can teach your child to behave. And I want you to take that worldview to heart, that we're going to teach our kids to behave, and we're going to use a teaching method rather than just looking at rewarding and punishment. Although consequences such as reinforcement and punishment, they enter into it. But we're going to look at behavior like a skill set. I also want to mention that behavior modification is not a quick fix. It's slow, it's steady, It requires a great deal of parent patience, and it also requires you as the parents to exert a lot of self-control. You can't just act naturally. You cannot just say and do what comes to mind, because you are your children's teacher. Therefore, you have to guide your child's interaction, and that means you're going to have to use some self-control, and you're going to have to be patient. Behavior change does not come quickly. It's slow, it's incremental, it has its ups and downs. And just like teaching a child to read, if your child makes an error reading a word, you're not going to feel like, well, this doesn't work. I'm not going to teach my child to read. They made a mistake. It doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work that way with behavior either. You will see a certain amount of mischievous behavior. You'll see a certain amount of inappropriate, unwanted behavior, and even dangerous behavior. And it doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't working, but we don't tend to see real change before sometimes even 6 to 9 months of effort. So it's not a quick fix. The process that we're going to use, though, to teach better behavior is called differential reinforcement, and I'm going to talk a lot about how to do that. But the first step, and this is critically important, and sometimes we forget it when we're dealing with kids who are demonstrating some really intense, rageful, or problematic behavior. One of the things we forget to do is to bring lots of fun and joy into every day. Why is that important? Well, it's important because obviously we want to have good action.
Much more so than Maya's.
And this might sound a little manipulative, but it's also so that when you remove yourself as a source of fun and attention, that has to have traction with your child. If they don't typically experience you as a source of fun, when you use removal of yourself and your attention, it won't matter because the child won't experience it as anything different. So keep in mind that being really fun and being really interesting and being a source of joy for your child, it's strategic. It's not only nice, but it's also strategic. So in a nutshell, you have to know a little bit about the principles of behavior in order to understand the techniques we're going to talk about. So quickly, behaviors tend to repeat when they get a payoff. Reinforcers kind of interchangeable with the word payoff. When a child is reinforced for a behavior or they get that payoff, it tends to repeat. Everybody involved gets payoffs from their interactions. So you as a parent are also going to have a payoff. If you do something and your child stops their behavior, they're actually reinforcing you. And so it works both ways, and you might be caught up in an inadvertent chain of the wrong thing. Keep in mind that when your child experiences a payoff for their behavior, it's going to increase, and it will increase whether that behavior is good or bad. Intention has no place here. Nature doesn't care whether the behavior is good or bad. If there's a payoff, it's going to repeat. So whether you intended it or not really is irrelevant. Unfortunately, behaviors get shaped up if they get that payoff, whether those behaviors were what you wanted to shape up or not. Your wishes really, unfortunately, aren't relevant when it comes to shaping up repertoires. So keep this in mind. We never want to reward bad behavior. If you don't like something, be well aware that you don't want to get that payoff. So having said that, we're going to move into, are there positive ways to reduce these undesirable behaviors? How do we actually increase good behaviors and decrease the ones we don't want? Well, how do we reduce behavior? We build better behavior. So in order to reduce behavior in positive ways, we have to understand the reason behind the behavior in the first place, and we call that function. So how do we identify the function of a behavior? Well, when a child is seeking something that they want. I'm sorry, I'm hearing a lot of talking. Is that, Bill, is that supposed to be happening or not?
No, I have everybody muted, so I don't know how that's,
Okay.
if you guys have, if you're coming through your computer, please just mute your computer on your side also. But everybody is muted.
Okay. All right, because I'm hearing a lot of talking. Okay. But back to the function. It's important to understand the purpose or function of your child's interaction, because in many ways we're going to actually use that to generate better behavior. Once we identify the function, we can teach the child to get that function met in cooperative and constructive ways. And I'm going to give you a process to follow that is going to replace wrong behavior with positive behaviors. You know, I am hearing a lot. I just want you to know, Bill, I'm hearing tons of talk. So if everybody—
I hear the same thing. I can't figure out who it is.
Okay. Anyway, all of you out there in TV land, in computer land, just mute your computer so I'm not hearing. It's kind of distracting. Okay. So what is this process called? If you get one thing from this whole webinar, I want you to understand the word shaping, and I want you to know how to do it, because that is going to be the key. So I'm going to now work on my shaping clip. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to minimize, and we're going to look at a clip. Maximize so you don't see my dogs. All right, you're going to look at a little video clip, and actually there's 3 parts to this clip of a little boy who has this behavior where he would not swallow any liquids. So he was hydrated through a tube. And let me just put this back in. I want to make sure you can hear me. Okay, so I'm going to pull this out when you hear the video clip so you can all hear the child and what we're doing with him. But to explain the video, this is a little boy who would not swallow any liquid, so therefore he had to be hydrated with a tube. And it was there was no structural problem with this child, but he would not swallow. What we needed to do was teach the child to swallow so that he could get rid of the port. And we used this process of shaping, and what it involves are 2 parts I want you to really pay attention to. One is you're going to hear more about this, called escape blocking. And what that means is when we are putting a condition on this little boy, we're not going to let him escape that condition. And as soon as he meets the condition, well, we reward it. And I'm hoping that you can guess, what is it that we're using as a reward? We're actually going to use 2 rewards. See if you can identify them. Start it.
Swallow. Swallow. Try again. Nope. You need to swallow. Hand sound. Hand sound. Hand sound. You need to swallow it. Yep. Your mouth. No. Yep, that's how you do it. Put your mouth around it. Thank you. Swallow. Swallow. There you go. Good job. Stand up, please.
Okay, part 2. Now, if you noticed, there was a reward that was actually attached to a swallow. Was it a good swallow? No, it was an approximation toward what we wanted. He just sort of smacked his lips, but it was better than what we had before. So we actually did reward the putting of his lips together as part of the shaping. And what did we use as the reward? Only one thing at that moment. All we used was we stopped putting the bottle to his lips. So removing the demand was the reward. And with kids with AHC, often that's what we're going to have to do, is that sometimes you have to remove the demand, but it's a reward for a little bit of compliance. Let's take a look at the next one.
Let's do one. Oh, come on. Swallow. 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 Nice job. Should I share my ice cream? By Mo Williams. Open the book. Yes, look at. What are Piggy and Elephant going to do today? Swallow. Swallow. Nice job. Yum! Then my best friend will be happy. I will do it. I'll share my... Oh no, what happened to the ice cream? It melted. Take a sip. Swallow. Beautiful. No! Now Piggy cannot have any of my ice cream. No, I cannot have any of my ice cream. I blew it. I blew it. What happened to the ice cream? It melted. One more. Swallow. Got it. Nice job. I blew it. All that ice cream melted. No.
Okay, so what I want to make sure you bring away from that is the process of shaping itself. We had a condition. We wanted the child to swallow the liquid. The child first just smacked his lips together, and the reward was removing the demand temporarily. Of course, we brought it back. The second stage was he was a little bit better at it, and when he actually did swallow that liquid, we brought in a double reinforcer. We took the bottle away and we presented him with his very favorite book. It may not have looked like he was so thrilled, but that's, this child's affect is always like that. He absolutely loves that particular book. So we brought that book in as a reinforcer for swallowing. And as you could see, he continued to do it. I could show you more and more of him, but to this day, he has no problem swallowing liquid. It's actually second nature for him. That's the process of shaping. You put on your condition on the child, they approximate it, you reward you by removing that condition. As the child gets better, you add reinforcement to it. So moving on with this process, we have to look at what's the child's motivation. Now, in this clip you just saw, his MO is not to swallow. Okay, that was his MO. But all children have motivations all throughout their day. It's a continuous life experience to want things. We call it an MO. So, for example, if your child's really, really hungry, any behavior that brings that food quicker will be reinforced. So if your child's hungry and they whine and nag and you hurry it up and bring that food quicker, they're going to learn to whine and nag. Any behavior that brings their MO closer will be reinforced. This can be a good thing, but it's also your dangerous thing, because kids with AHC, and we're going to get more specifically to AHC, many of these kids use rage as a way to get what they want. And unfortunately, it's easy to reinforce that. By the way, I have this as the last sentence. Using reasoning will not change the pattern. What we're talking about are behaviors that are reinforced through what happens to a child. And what we tell our children is much less influential than the actions that occur. So those payoffs and what happens when I do something, that's really what shapes behavior. What we tell kids, it's like frosting on the cake. It can help. The way we present things can help. But typically, telling your child alone is not really going to change a behavior pattern. We've all heard about antecedents, so I want to be real clear about how those function. The antecedent specifically is anything that happens before a behavior. And here I'm talking about problem behaviors, but it's an antecedent can be to good behavior too. So it's anything that happens before. I want to clarify something. Antecedents do not cause behavior, but they do set a chain of behavior in motion. So they can trigger a whole chain. What actually changes behavior, maintains behavior, and shapes behavior, that's still the consequence. An example of how an antecedent may function, for example, if your child's hungry, seeing that Burger King sign or seeing the golden arches, that may start the chain of screaming, "Burger King now!" However, what happens when that child says Burger King now? What happens to that child next? That's what's going to shape that child's behavior. You're going to have a screamer and a demander if, in fact, when they yell Burger King now, you pull in. So it's the pulling in and eating the burger that shapes up that screaming Burger King now when I see one. That's the pattern. We're going to keep talking about this. But yet, it's the consequence that shapes that behavior. I want to sidetrack a little bit and give you an example. A friend of mine and I were going to a restaurant. We were really, really hungry. It was 3 o'clock. We hadn't eaten all day. Happened to be Halloween weekend. She was driving. We didn't realize that there would be so many people out by the restaurant. Couldn't find a parking place. People are all over. We're both getting frustrated and we're hungry. Somebody pulls out and they block us from going down the street we needed to go to get our parking. And my friend starts swearing. She's using all kinds of bad language. She's pounding on the steering wheel. And I sit there completely calm. If antecedents cause behavior, we would both react the same way. We're both blocked. We're both hungry. Same condition. We had two completely different reactions. It was the history of consequences that made my friend scream, yell, and swear, and me not. We had different life histories. We had different consequences. Therefore, we reacted to the same situation differently. So we're very soon going to get to why your child with AHC may react to things a certain way, but you do have a lot of control over how that child's behavior is shaped up in reaction to those same antecedents. Keep in mind that when you give in to undesirable behavior, you're actually shaping the wrong behavior. This slide talks about why we tend to give in. And clearly we give in because we find behaviors to be difficult, traumatic, annoying, sometimes scary, or sometimes we feel sorry for our child, and so we give in for that reason. But as I said earlier, nature doesn't care why. It simply will reinforce behavior regardless of the fact that we might understand why it's happening, or we may feel sorry for our child. It's still going to stamp in a pattern that's going to be extremely non-functional and sometimes even dangerous if we reinforce it. So I strongly urge everybody, be aware, whatever you give into that behavior, even once or twice, and sometimes it's even worse when we give in only occasionally, but even if you give in just a little bit, you're going to shape that behavior up. So let's get to AHC. I'm going to take a little sip. I've worked a lot with kids who have neurological disorders, chromosomal disorders, and many disorders that have a motoric effect. So kids with AHC, kids with Dravet syndrome, kids with seizures, Kinsborn syndrome particularly has kids who have extreme motor difficulty, epilepsy, Tourette, cerebral palsy. There are many disorders that are neurologically based that in fact have a motor component. And these behaviors tend to shape certain kinds of reactions in kids. These children have an increased tendency to present with oppositional behaviors that have a control function. Now, do all kids show this? No. All kids don't show it. but there is a kind of a trend, there's a likelihood that kids who have motor issues also have a tendency to present with extreme control functions, and there's a good reason why. Why? Why, you ask? Well, when you have kids who have deficits in motor coordination or sudden and unpredictable lack of motor control, which is what AHC kids experience, it's an extremely frightening, it's an extremely frustrating and difficult situation. Child feels a lack of control over their own body, which typical kids do not feel. These are kids who have an unpredictable and often very scary feeling of loss, feeling of frustration, feeling of low self-esteem, and it affects how they see the world and how they see themselves in the world. And it can be extremely devastating for kids, and we do feel bad for them. That doesn't mean that we're going to enable wrong behaviors, because that actually makes the situation worse, not better. But kids who have this limited motor coordination will show high control function. And I think you're probably getting at where I'm going. If you cannot feel a sense of mastery and control over your own body, you try to control everything you can any way you can. In my early career, I worked a lot with kids who had severe cerebral palsy and were in wheelchairs. And what did they tend to do? Scream, because that's what they could do. They tended to lash out. If they could talk, they would call names. They would say rude things. They would bang back and forth in their wheelchairs. They would bite. They would do whatever it was they could based on the frustration they experienced with their own sense of a lack of control over their bodies. So this is an understandable and typical response to these motor impairments. But what we want to do is help kids to develop better ways of dealing with those kinds of issues. So we're going to see, well, all right, before we get our cure, our treatment, it's obviously we can't cure these behaviors, but what we can do is address the behaviors in ways that make sense. First, we have to understand about the rage burst. So if a child has a rage burst, it can sometimes be some of the cause can be truly just learned. I want what I want. And so that's one kind of rage burst. And sometimes it can be involuntary, related to the disorder itself. So for example, kids who have seizure disorder often have rage episodes before seizures. Sometimes some of them will have it after a seizure. So that really depends on the child. But we do see this, and some of it can fall into what we might call an involuntary rage burst, where the child's not in complete control of it. This is something we just, I know that you as AHC parents, I know you live with this, and it can be devastating and difficult. And at that point, when a child is having a rage burst, I will show you how to ultimately deal with it at that reactive level, but what you're going to end up doing is more of a damage control and kind of waiting through it to end. But it's important to know and to be able to differentiate, is this an involuntary rage burst? Is this involuntary, or does the child have control over it? And is there a way that I can tell the difference? Well, there is a way to tell the difference in its pure forms. So if something is completely involuntary, an example would be seizure or a rage attached to seizure. My son happens to have Tourette syndrome, tics. It's involuntary. Those are involuntary motor movements. And sometimes screaming can be part of that involuntary response. And we have to be able to tell, okay, is my child screaming as part of a behavioral issue, or is this part of my child's disorder? One of the ways that we can tell if this is involuntary is that it's very stereotypical. So think of a hiccup, think of a tic, think of a seizure. They look the same each time, or nearly the same. it has a distinct beginning, middle, and ending. And the third one's very important. It does not tend to be interactive with the environment. In other words, it occurs regardless of what I'm saying or doing with my child. Behaviors really doesn't change based on what I may offer, what I may do, or what I may say. And that tends to be an involuntary behavior. Now, is it voluntary then? Well, how do we tell that? If the form of the irritability or behavior is different from incident to incident, if the words change, the body changes, if it tends to be continuous until I get what I want, it's voluntary. Sometimes it can be continuous until the child gets distracted or tires out. Then you're going to see it could be voluntary or involuntary. And then again, the key here is it interactive and responsive? If the child responds to my input, it's a learned voluntary repertoire. The child may escalate or switch up the way they're acting, then they have some control over it. They may not have full control, so it may be a little of both. Once an involuntary behavior becomes voluntary, when it becomes public. So you may have even a child, as just disclosure with my son, where he would have tics. Sometimes those tics were just a little bit put on. How did I know the difference? Well, if the tic that he was exhibiting could change or stop based on something that I did or said or offered, I knew it was a little bit of put on. But many times it wasn't, and I needed to know the difference. And that's why it helps to be able to look at that and tell the difference. Once the behavior becomes public, though, now it can often become voluntary. For example, and I use the example on the slide, children cry, that's involuntary. They have an emotion, they stub their toe, they cry. That's an involuntary behavior. But we have some control over it, and some kids can often have a lot of control over it and often cry when they're not in pain at all, as we all know. What can happen is when involuntary behaviors become voluntary because they get a result, what can happen is what we call behavior spread or generalization. Now I want to talk a little bit about the control function. We talked about how kids with motor issues have a tendency to have a very strong control function because, in fact, they have little control and mastery over their own body and over their own motor skills. So it's understandable. But how do you recognize it? How do you know it's a control function? Here are a few little tips. Behavior that has a control function often is unpredictable. So this is a child that displays these behaviors sometimes and not other times. Sometimes you try something, it works one day, it doesn't work the next day. They like something one day, they reject it the next. When you feel like you don't know what you're going to get, the lady or the tiger, it's a control function. These kids tend to be oppositional. Once they know what you want, that's just what they're not going to do. Once they know that you're invested in a behavior, often that's just exactly what they won't give you. Also, the behavior switches up. So this is a real tip-off that a child has a control function. When the child cooperates with some people, punishes others, or demonstrates desirable behaviors and then suddenly switches to the negative, like they might be real nice, I really like you, and then they spit at you, that's a control function. They catch you off guard, they switch it up, that's a control function. And kids typically who have control functions will pit parents or relatives off of one another. So they'll favor one parent over another parent. Sometimes they will even switch that up, but sometimes it'll be fairly stable. They always like mom, they don't want dad, or vice versa. Also, you have a sense that the child's manipulating you. And often what they'll do is they use words to trick or confuse people. These are for kids who are very verbal. Verbal child will often set up situations that sabotage plans. I'll give you an example. Child may earn something, they may have been very good, and so the family's going to go out for ice cream. Everybody gets to go out for ice cream because little Johnny was great today. And then especially if he has a sibling, oh goody, 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 we're going out for ice cream, then that child who has the control function will say, I don't want to go. I'm not going. They sabotage the plans. That keeps them in control. Why? Because being in control is a more valuable payoff. It's a more valuable reinforcer than the thing that you're getting. I want you to keep that in mind, that often for these kids, controlling their environment is paramount to anything else. And so a lot of the incentive systems that we try to use with these kids don't work, because being in control overrides getting whatever it was. It's more important to the child than anything that you could offer. And a last word about the control function, the way the tantrums show up. The child will switch up from being pleasant to then being punishing. They might whine and cry for what they want. You don't give it to them. Then they blow up and punish you by throwing a tantrum. And in that way, they keep switching around. So here's the pitfall. If you don't have any more time and you got to get off the webinar, this is the one thing you need to know. This is like what not to do. This is the biggest pitfall that all parents fall into. You start off where maybe you didn't plan things as well as you could have. Let me get a little drink. Like switching up, transitioning from a high preference fun to something like low preference. Like we're having a great time, now it's time for bed. Or giving bad news to the child in the car. Never do that. Never, ever tell the child, no, they're not getting something while you're driving. If you haven't figured that one out already, make a rule. I only say yes or no at home. If they say why, you say, well, the answer will always be no if you ask me in the car. Okay, so it's always at home where you're safer. So maybe you didn't plan things well. You end up having to tell the child no. So the child, it starts with a denial. The child then escalates and throws a tantrum. The parent then gives in. Child learns to throw a tantrum to get what she wants. This is probably the most common reason for tantrums that any child has. They end up where when they throw the tantrum, or they will always kind of hold you over a barrel, and they use bad behavior, disruptive behavior, or dysregulated behavior. They hold that behavior, almost holding you hostage by that behavior. They use it to intimidate you into pleasing them as much as possible, particularly in public. So it's a very common thing. So what's the lesson out of this? If you're going to say no, you have to stick with it, no matter what happens. You can't switch a no to a yes based on behavior that makes you uncomfortable. You just can't do it. So what's our answer? Well, the first step is we have to build competence. The key to children who come to us with deficits that make their lives difficult, like our children with AHC, their life is difficult. They don't feel as competent as other kids. You have to find everything you possibly can to help that child feel competent. That doesn't mean always making them happy. It doesn't mean always doing things that they're good at, that's fun. It just means making your child as functional as possible. These kids have to learn how to take care of themselves to the extent that they're physically able, whatever that extent is. And as I said, I got my start working with children with severe cerebral palsy who are in wheelchairs. We still had them doing what they could to feel as competent as their bodies and their abilities allowed them. So I'm going to now switch us up to a couple of video tapes. Okay, so I just want to set the stage here. This is a little girl who was extremely disruptive. She was kicked out of her kindergarten class for being disruptive and also for running away. She would go to the grocery store and literally run through the aisles and knock everything down from the aisle, screaming, running. She was not welcome very many places. What we did is we shaped her to have some level of competence. So you're going to see what that looks like.
Okay, should we do it again? No. Next thing. Okay, parsley. This is next. It's called parsley. I just didn't want to get one of those. That's the only thing. Okay, moving right along. So I'll show you for this one what we're going to do. Where is the parsley? It's up that way. Actually, no, the bananas are right here. Grace, get some bananas. Yep, that's it. Thank you. They're the same. That's so good the way she did that. That's so good. Good to get the parsley. We've never gotten parsley here before. So that's a new thing. You know what?
I want to set the stage for this next part. So that was her we eliminated all of the disruptive behavior by simply teaching her to be competent in the store. The next, so this is the teaching model, teaching the replacement behavior. The next one I'm going to show you is how to correct errors. So this was a child who ran away a lot. What you're not seeing, and for the lack of, it's not an all-day workshop, were the shaping her to stay close. So she does know, just to prepare you for this next clip, she knows the prompt to stay close. She knows to stay close. She's already learned that she's supposed to stay in proximity to her mom. I want to show you what to do when that behavior does not occur. It's called error correction.
Have her come back and say the rule. Stop the cart. Okay? She's too far from you. You forgot to stay close. Let's try that again. Here's Mom. Here's the cart. Stay close. Try again. Let's go. That's good. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. That is a great idea. You're going to push? You want to sit? Yeah. Okay. 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 Here, let me help you. 1, 2, 3. Oh. Okay, that's one way to do it. Okay.
This last one I want you to see for what your goal with your child is going to be. And I want to mention something about the previous slide. Error correction. So if she had not come back, the idea was to go get her, bring her back, and have her repeat the behavior to correct it. So you have to do a redo. You do it the right way. But I want to point out something that's relevant to AHC kids. So here's what she did. She didn't want to have to try again. She did not want to do that. She wanted to control the interaction. So when she asked to sit in the car, that was her way of manipulating the situation and being in control. Why did we accept it? Because I was using control as a reward for the fact that she did come back. So in shaping a kid's behavior, they don't have to be perfect. I'm looking, I'm saying, look, she came back on her own. She wants to be in control. I'm going to actually use control as a reinforcer for doing what is at least better. She didn't run away. She didn't knock things off the shelves. That's better. I'm going to let her be in control. So I was well aware that she manipulated. She even said, ha ha, at the end. So she knows she's controlling, but and that was a payoff for her. But what was it a payoff? It was a payoff for coming back to the cart. So this is the last thing I'm going to show you on her. I'm going to move along.
Did it. Okay. What now? What now? What? Oh. Do you want your receipt? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. You want to get the receipt? Yeah. Thank you. Here's the reward. Nice job. Leave that there. Need some help? So do it just a little and then let her do the rest. Okay, pop it open. Go like this. There we go. I did it! You did it! Nice job, you did it!
Okay, so you can see the joy of competence. And I can't overstate that. For kids who have motor issues, for kids who don't feel competent in their lives, you have to contrive, you have to set things up, you have to loosen a jar and have the child open it themselves. You have to put that child in a situation where they're the hero of their family, where it's not just doing things for themselves, but doing things for the whole family that makes everybody feel like they did something great for everybody. The feeling of, I can't overestimate competence, because that's the replacement for tantrums, for disruptive behavior, for bossy behavior, for demanding behavior. When a child feels competent, they feel they have high self-esteem. They feel successful. And when they feel successful, happiness is the outgrowth. So my motto is that that competence builds success, which builds happiness. You cannot be happy unless you feel a sense of competence in the world. So moving along to how do you shape replacement behaviors? I'm going to go quickly since we're I'm going to skip this one. Okay, here's the sequence. So let's go to the rage burst. Let's say your child's having a tantrum for what they want. Let's say that it's a voluntary tantrum. Remember that we're going to talk about the involuntary rage burst, but there's not a lot you can do other than keep the child safe and ride that one out. But if most of the tantrums have a little of both. So if a child is tantruming for what she wants, what I want you to initially do is actually interrupt it, like just to hold it. Prompt the replacement behavior, whatever that may be, like ask, take this, put that there, hold this. Yes, you can. Do you want this? You replace, you give the child a better way of expressing what they want. And once they do the replacement behavior, you give it quickly. Let me give you an example of what it looks like. So I worked with a child who had cerebral palsy and also was hearing impaired. So what she did was she would slap people's faces to get their attention. She did not have speech, so how was she going to get their attention? She got into a habit of slapping you in the face hard. She did that to me. I was talking to her mom. She wanted to interrupt me talking and get the attention for herself, so she slapped me hard in the face. I acted like I did not feel it. I continued to talk to her mom. After I finished talking to her mom, maybe another word or two, I turned abruptly to the child. I hand over hand had her tap me on the shoulder. It was like I took her hand, I went like this, and then I made a big show of, oh, what do you want? So that she's seeing, oh, this motion, that's what she wants me to do to get attention. What do you want? Well, I turned back and talked to her mom. I knew she was going to slap me again. She did. I did the same thing again. Held her hand, showed her to tap. What do you want? By the third time, she's tapping me and not slapping me. Sometimes it takes longer, but that's a good example of this process of you interrupt something, you give them a quick and easy way to get the payoff that's better than what they're doing now. And then you have to make it work so that the child says, oh, this is what works. The other doesn't work. That's that extinction, that escape extinction. That's not going to work. Slapping me in the face did not get me to stop. I didn't stop and say, don't do that. I continued to talk. In other words, doesn't work. Here's what does work. Tap me on the shoulder. Okay, real quick. Throughout the day, when you're with your child, every minute of every day, you are the child's teacher. There's just no escaping it. We who have special needs kids cannot relax. You can't just be yourself other than when you're in the middle of having fun. But otherwise, throughout a day, you are always differentiating. You are always teaching. And what are you teaching? You're teaching that correct behaviors work. Incorrect behaviors just don't work very well. So you cannot give in to the problem behaviors. You differentiate your responses. Something's correct, something's helpful. You give that child control. You give that child what they want. You give that child some form of attention that you already know is meaningful to the child, and you proceed. In the early stages, we can handle a little wrong behavior, interrupt it, replace it, and then reinforce. But after a while, you can't accept any of the wrong behavior and constantly say it nicely. After you've already prompted that over time, we have to expect that from the get-go from a child, but not in the early stages. I already talked about how giving control as a reward. We don't often think of that. You think of rewards always as candy or games or playtime or the computer. Actually, control is your child's top reinforcer. So you kind of capture control. You can do that by giving choices, but you can also give control by giving them the bossy kind of thing, letting them boss. For example, with Gracie, I knew that her choosing to sit in the cart rather than walk alongside, that was her way of getting control, but I wanted to reinforce her coming back to the cart, therefore I allowed it. So having that child be in control at your behest, that's fine. In fact, that's going to be very powerful. Okay, we talked about those. I'm going to quickly go through this. I said at the very beginning, every day you have to establish yourself as a reward for the child. So here's the importance of that. You yourself have to be able to use your body and your attention as a reinforcer. But I just finished saying that control is your child's top reinforcer, not you. So we have to start pairing you up with fun. So the child begins to see you as the gateway to fun. Not all the time. You're not fun all the time. When you have to do the shutdown, when you have to do that escape extinction, like we didn't move the bottle from the boy's mouth, he didn't like us then. But he liked us a minute later when we were reading the book and having fun. So your child has to see you as a doorway to joy and fun. If they don't, then you can't use the other techniques successfully. So it's very important to establish yourself as also a form of reinforcement, or all you have is control and you don't have much leverage there. So this joyous part is actually a very important strategic part of the plan. Right. There's two levels to this defiance and rage that we're going to talk about. And the first one is just refusal. Child's not in a rage. They're just saying no to you. That's when you use that escape blocking or escape extinction. You saw that being done with the boy with the bottle. We did not let him escape the task. We stood there and we just didn't move until he did what we wanted, or an approximation. So refusal to put your toy on the shelf, We don't leave the room till you do. We stand there. You don't have to be yelling. You don't shout. You're just a quiet insister. We're going to do this. And if time is an issue, leave it on the floor, but get back to it. So don't pick up after your child. If your child has thrown things on the floor and you've got to get to school, you have to go and say, well, we didn't have time to do that escape locking. Leave it. Do it later. Do it before the TV goes on or before you hand that iPad. Oh, we got something to do first. And don't let them get out of it until it's done. What does the environment look like when you're doing an escape blocking thing where you don't let that child escape? What is the environment supposed to look like when that child's having a rage burst, which we're going to get into it in the next slide? You have to control not only yourself and your reactions, you have to control your environment. And you do that with a strategic shutdown. This is absolutely critical. It's the other side of the equation from being joyful, from showing fun. So you have to be two people. You have to be the fun person, the fun parent, and you also have to be that shutdown parent, the brick wall parent, because there are times when you have to give the message that this is not okay, the fun is over. This is a shutdown. You have to stop talking, don't yell. Yelling actually gives control to the child. So this is really important to understand. If you scream and yell at your child, or you threaten, or you yourself get out of control, I want you to realize that when you're doing that, it's like you're throwing candy at your kid. Kids who have control functions love to see their parents get out of control. They love it. It's a surge of power. So I want you all to be boring when you're faced with wrong behavior. Your child's misbehaving. You have to suddenly become boring. Don't become exciting, interesting. And you're very exciting and interesting when you yourself lose control and you start yelling. Kids think it's funny. They may not be laughing. They may even cry, but they like it. They're reinforced by it because who made you do that? They made you do that. And if your child is making you do that, making you lose control, then they're in control of you. And that's a huge payoff for any behavior that it followed. Any behavior, good or bad. And often it's the bad behavior that makes you lose control. So I need you to shut down your voice, shut down your face. Don't give a reaction. If your child calls you a name, I hate you, or worse, like when my daughter said, she didn't like what I was saying, and she said, you look old. Okay, and you know what? Okay, now I do. Then I didn't. Okay, but I could have reacted and said, that's not nice. That hurts my feeling. Don't do that. That's exactly what she wants. She wants that reaction. So what's important is when you're getting a behavior, you're getting verbal that you don't want to see again, become boring. Shut down your voice, shut down your face, poker face. Shut down any fun, shut down the TV if it's on, turn off the computer, turn off music. You can even throw a blanket over toys if your child's really young and playing with things. Leading to tantrums. Sometimes the behavior is more than just refusal or yelling. Sometimes you have a full out rage. It gets more complicated when the child is in the midst of harm, but I'm going to first just talk about rage, where they may be throwing things, they're yelling, they may be throwing themselves on the ground, they may be hitting you, the full tantrum. I want you to use this 3-part sequence. Keeping in mind, this is not, you're not going to teach anything here. There's really nothing that you can teach when a child is this emotionally active. Under this kind of emotion, kids don't learn much. The problem is, the one thing they can learn is to do this again. So what you're trying to do with reacting to a tantrum is simply make sure that they're not learning the wrong thing. They can't really learn the right thing. That's too hard. But they can easily learn the wrong thing if they get a big reaction from you or if you give in. Those are the two bad things that can actually increase tantrums and maintain tantrums, sometimes for a lifetime. So here's the sequence. When your child is first having a tantrum, particularly given a younger age child, you may want to know, do they need help? If your child's having an episode, your child may in fact need your help. So you don't want to just react to a rage with a kid with AHC, assuming that they're just wanting what they want when they want it. When we have children who actually have a disorder that can be involved here, we have to first see if they need our help. So your first level is seeing if they need help. And I want you to say it in a specific way. I don't want you to say necessarily, do you need help? But what I do want you to say is, what can I do to help? The reason that's important is because it allows that child to be more specific about what they need, whether it's helping brushing their teeth, helping putting on clothes, whatever it is that they may actually need or that they're frustrated with. When you say, what can I do? You're going to get some kind of a noun or a verb. What you're not going to get is no. If you say, can I help you? The child may in fact need and want your help, but they're in such an emotional state that they have to say, everything you say, I say no, right? They're in that kind of a mood. So if they're in that kind of a mood and you say, can I help you? They may automatically say, no. Well, they may actually need your help. So it's very positive to ask, what can I do to help you? If you get the smart aleck response, you still might get a no. Or the child continues to rage, don't keep asking. Well, what can I do? What can I do to help you? You ask once, maybe twice, that's it. Move to number 2, which is a prompt. The next level is, if you don't immediately get some kind of a hint from your child of what they need help with, you can use a distractor prompt. At an early stage of a tantrum, it can often work. So it could be a sudden, and I use the example, oh look, daddy left his phone on the couch. Can you give it to him? You know your kid. You know the things that they might be distracted with. The only thing I say stay away from is you don't distract with a reward, because you don't want to pay off tantrums. So you wouldn't say, oh, here's a piece of candy. Oh, look, grandma bought you a new present. Here it is. You wouldn't distract with that. But you would distract with something that might be, oh, who's that? Wait, what's the neighbor doing? Or is that Joni across the street? You can do that. It's nice if there's a prompt with it. Like, oh my goodness, my pencil broke. I want to sharpen it. Of course, that could be dangerous. But you want to use a distractor that is a sort of an abrupt shift in the stimuli. Because as we said, a voluntary tantrum is going to kind of be continuous, but it can be interrupted by some new entering stimulus. Sometimes a phone ringing can interrupt a tantrum. Make sure, though, that, again, you're not offering rewards. Likely, if it's a really strong, intense rage burst, it won't work. So don't keep prompting. I do that one time. I would try one. At the very most, I might do 2, but generally I do 1 prompt. If the prompt doesn't work, that distractor prompt, then I have to go into 3, which everybody hates because it's weighted out. You really cannot shorten a rage burst that has already been demonstrated. Help and prompt don't work. All you can do is keep that child safe, damage control, wait it out, but I want you to wait it out this way. You don't wait it out talking, reasoning, trying to help the child to use coping strategies. It's too late for that. Offering squishies and that kind of thing, it's usually too late for that. Sometimes kids will respond well to some of the OT things like being wrapped. That would be okay if you wanted to do that. But otherwise, shut everything down. Monitor your child for safety, but don't talk. No more talking, no eye contact, no bribing, no touching. At that point, you're waiting it out. You may need to block your child from throwing and breaking things, but do so in like you're a robot. Don't do it by saying, don't do that, no, please, don't throw that. It's only going to make it worse. And then delayed accountability. So let's say you have had to wait it out and it was a 3-hour rage burst. everybody's exhausted, everybody's miserable. And you feel like, okay, child just broke things. The child, we kept him or her safe, but it was ugly and there was damage. And you feel like you want that child to be accountable, but what do? I use a chore plan that is a delayed form of accountability. You really can't do this with a child who is younger than, I would say, maybe 5 years old. Sometimes I might, it depends on the child's level of functioning, but 4 or 5, that's about, and then you have to really modify it. But older than that, I hold that child more and more accountable as they are older and older. And the way it looks is, you, in the moment of rage, you do nothing. When everything is done, everything is over, you can put a Post-it note on a cabinet. It's like an IOU. And it could even be the next day. It can even be, if this happens on a Thursday, it could even be over the weekend. But that Post-it note tells that child, you're going to be accountable. It's not quite over. And I like using effort-based consequences rather than just taking things away. Kids don't, the brain does not remember or track what didn't happen. I didn't get my iPad. The child doesn't remember what they didn't get. But they do, the brain does track effort and accomplishment. So when you perform a chore, that's in the brain, that's in memory. Now, chores are not, what the child wants to be doing, but it shouldn't be done like a real mean punishment kind of thing. It's not really to punish as much as it's to hold a child accountable for being helpful. When they had the rage burst, that was hindering. It was hurtful to everybody around them. So you want that child to have a sense of being able to be accountable and make up for it in a productive, constructive way. Another good outcome is that the child's also learning how to do things that make them more competent. I'm going to give you a quick, oh God, things are going too quickly. I'm going to give you a little quick somebody that you know. And yes, somebody, it should be a familiar face. Here's somebody you know. Here's the Post-it note going on. She's saying no in the background. Okay, it was really quick. I just want to see something here. That's not it. And here's the chore.
Get the corners.
I know it's so I know that was really quick, but what you saw is that when the rage burst is happening, again, that's not the moment for a chore. So you put up the Post-it, it's an IOU. Later on, the child owes chores. You can have multiple. You may have, let's say it's a Thursday, Friday, you may have 4 Post-it notes up there. So then Saturday is not, it's not fun-filled. It may be doing chores. The side effect is a benefit of, as I said, the child actually learns some skills, which really come in handy. Now, I use this with my own daughter, who was very oppositional. And here's the funny thing. So she, unlike my son, she really had more of those. She had a lot of them that she had to do. But when she was in high school and they were asking her what she wanted to do when she grew up, she actually said she wanted to be a maid. And I said, you want to be a maid? She said, Mom, I am really good at cleaning. And so, so if you're worried, okay, is my child never going to want to do things in the house? It actually doesn't work that way. And the reason it doesn't work that way is if you're not mean and nasty about it, you're just neutral. When the chore is done, you can actually compliment the result. Oh my gosh, look how good this looks. Now that's helping. Look at this bathroom now. Now that's a helping behavior. That really helps us all. That, or if you don't want to even say that, you can simply say, this bathroom never looked better. Oh my gosh, great. This is fantastic. So the chores have a utility in many ways. Yes, it holds that child accountable for that behavior when they're calm, but it also teaches skills, and it also gives you a way to compliment your child. Now, but what about these rage bursts that are actually kind of dangerous? So what I do is I make sure everybody that I work with has a safe place in their home for, it could be to be just rest. It's not just a punishment place, okay? It's a place to just be safe. So you have to have nice things happening there too, like music or books or something like that. And it looks like this. Okay. This is what I wanted to present. This is kind of the Behavior 101, and now we're ready for questions.
Great job, Alice. Congratulate Alice, everybody. The technology first time using. So.
First time using, okay.
What's that? Okay. All right, everybody. We have questions. She's popping up here. Let's see. Okay. You should be able to unmute yourself right on the participant chat window. There's a mute button next to your name. If you just click that and hit unmute, or if I think the first question is for my sister-in-law. All right. Kelly, are you still on the phone? Kelly Scott? Let's see. A lot of names here. Hold on a minute. Kelly Scott. Unmute.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Kelly, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. You want to ask your question to Alice?
Hi, Alice.
Hi.
So my sister-in-law is an adult with AHC, and I believe her mum, Valerie, is also part of the Zoom. So hi, Val. One of the things that I struggle with, we have Claire come and visit us, and one of the ways that she exerts control is asking us to do things that we know she can do for herself. And so when we say, is there something I can do to help? She will say yes, but we will be doing things that is taking away that feeling of competence that is so important. So I was wondering if you might have any suggestions for that.
I do. Okay. And can everybody hear me? I still have this in. You can. Okay. So I do. And what I want you to apply is something called prompt fading. So you don't have to say a full yes or a full no. In a case where she wants help, you're going to get her started. You're going to say, okay, let me get you started, or okay, just say okay. And you get her started. So a good example of that, the little girl in the store, I think you saw the mom, you saw her struggle with the pretzel bag. So the mom, so it wasn't and she asked for help. So what the mother did was she just opened it a little bit and let the child finish. That's called prompt fading. It's like what you're doing is you're fading the help. So you're not saying, no, you can do it yourself completely. You might be getting her started. Now, let's say it's something that this child does, or this young woman does all the time, and it's clear that it's something that they can do, and they just kind of want you to, do it for them. There are ways of kind of subtly not doing it. So it might be, well, I can, but I have something I need to do first, and it's going to take a while. So, get started yourself, and I'll come in when I'm ready. So you kind of, yes, it is kind of a trick, but what you want to do is avoid a direct confrontation, and you want to be a little bit more subtle. Like, I'm not really saying I don't want to help you, but what you're doing is you're not making yourself as fully available. So what ends up happening is the child is like, gosh, it's easier to just do it myself because you're slow or you only do a little. So I would fade slowly how much I help without being confrontational. Now, that's not to say, Kelly, that occasionally it's okay to say, oh, you know, you got this. You got this. You see what I mean? Using language that's kind of positive. When you know this is something so ridiculous, I'm not even going to do a little help. You know, it's ridiculous. You know, there's all stages of what a person needs. So I might be very kind of, what's the expression? It's like, I know you can do, almost like, you know, by the way, can people still see me if I gesture, Bill?
Yes,
okay.
yes,
So,
we can still see.
I can't see myself. So
Let me grab this. Let me grab this so we can see you full screen.
Okay. So.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So it might be that you might even be like this, almost like make a joke out of it, Kelly. It's kind of like, oh, you got this. Like she's being silly. Like, oh, you got this. So you would use a variety of techniques. It's not just like one thing all the time, like scripted. You'd look at the situation, get her started, delay your help. So there's a getting her started. There's a delaying your help to the point where she's just going to want to do it herself because she doesn't want to wait. There's fading how much you help in that moment. And then there's also just, oh, you got this.
Yeah.
See you in a bit. Wait, I'll be right back, hon. Again.
She's incredibly patient. So, and we definitely are late for things if she is determined that she's going to get help. So I wouldn't use that one perhaps. But
so don't use that one. Okay. But you might use the get started one and you might use the you got this one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now here's another thing. If this is habitual with this person, I would use, knowing that it's a little manipulative, I would kind of use that control thing. So for example, let's say she got started. Let's say you said, you got this. Oh, you got this. And you actually saw her getting started. Do you know I might actually come in and help as a reward for having started it herself.
Okay.
At the very end.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Because then what you're doing is you're rewarding initiation. And I get the feeling that for her, it's the initiation that's the hardest part. Yes, no?
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. Mm-hmm. Often it's initiating. So when kids are like that, where we call them prompt dependent kids, it's more than just being prompt dependent. It's learned helplessness. They don't want to make the effort. And then they like controlling everybody around them. It's kind of fun. They're the queen. So, so what I might do is I might think, I'm going to do this in stages and I'm going to reward initiation. So if she gets started, I might strategically come in later.
That's great. That's a really good suggestion. Thank you.
Hi, Jen Franco. Do you have a question? I can ask it if you want, or I can unmute you. You can actually do video if you wanted to, and do a one-on-one with Alice if you wanted to.
No, that's fine. I have a question now. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Hi, Alice. This is Jen Franco, and I actually saw your presentation in 2014 in Minneapolis. So it was extremely helpful. I mean, it's something that I've utilized with the schools, and everybody's on board. At that time, my daughter was still in middle school, and she had a rough 8th grade. And so the behavior part, everything with your Cub system really worked. I mean, it worked fairly well. What? But as she's gotten older, and I mean, really in the last 2 to 3 years, and I don't know if this is considered OCD behavior, but it's such a part of our lives now. So a typical day, she goes to school and she comes home. I work from home office in the afternoons and get her off the bus. She has about a series of about just 50 questions that are the exact same, asked about the same time, like when she gets off the bus. And I have to respond in the exact same manner. Like, it cannot be, it cannot be yeah. If I answer it can't be yes. I mean, she gets so enraged if I don't answer the appropriate way. And here I am trying to work as well and write an email. But she's even gone into an episode from it. And this is only the last couple of years.
Okay. All right, dear. Oh, I wish I had mentioned it right away. Called me right away. Okay, because the longer it goes. So let me tell you what that is and what we can do about it. That's a verbal ritual. And it's extremely common with OCD. Extremely. I've had probably.
She didn't do it when she was young.
No, but it can start at any time. I'm just saying that it's extremely common. It's an OCD behavior, and it's called a verbal ritual. And unfortunately, it can cause a lot of rage. I say this, you say that. And it's very specific, but it's a trap. And so it's actually going along with it is actually not the right thing to do. However, I understand why you do it, because not going along with it can produce really rageful an episode. I understand this. So here's what I'm going to suggest you try. Going along with it just when she wants here's what it'll do. It'll satisfy her maybe in the moment, but she'll never stop. It's going to hook in. The only time it might stop is if it waxes or wanes into a different ritual. Like she may kind of shift her ritual. But for now, this verbal ritual is reinforced by this exchange that she prompts, and she wants to hear everything exactly the same way. Here's what I want you to do.
Okay.
And it's not, there may be some bad effects initially, but it's
That's
you're
okay.
never going
I'm
to
good with it.
Okay. All right. So you have to let her know that it's called stimulus control. That's the technique. And what it is you're going to have a time and a place and a beginning and an end. You're going to set your timer for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is. And you're going to let her set her time. You know, Honey, I don't know her name, little Honey.
Elena.
I will do that talking thing with you, that talk time that you like, but I will do it only for 10 minutes, and you pick. It's going to be sometime between 4 and 5. I'm just making these times up. You set when it's convenient for you. And we're going to set a timer, and I will do this little talk thing with you at this time, in this place. But Elena, I'm not going to do it at any other time. So like when she comes home from school, I don't want you to have that be part of the time. I want it to be some other time. Like it could be an hour later, it could be 20 minutes later. But the idea is that you put that exchange, that ritual, under what we call, a discriminative stimulus. So you put it under the control of a signal, like think of it a green light, red light. The reason that that's helpful is because when you put parameters under it, what you're doing is you're controlling that ritual, and you're actually removing the maintaining variables, which is she gets the urge, then she gets complete control over that, and it's like the habit is going to just run amok. She's not going to be able to stop. It's not under any control. And what ends up happening is by you following suit, it's so powerfully reinforcing she can't give it up. So because of how emotionally triggered she is, you don't want to say, I'm not going to do that. I will not. And you don't want to just say no. You don't want to try to break it up just off the cuff. You have to do it in a scheduled way. So you are going to tell her, and I would tell her, maybe the night before, maybe the afternoon before, but I'd let her know, that talk thing we do, however you want to, you know her better than me, but that talk thing, that's okay, but it's okay. We're going to set an appointment time for that. I will do that between blah, blah, blah and blah, blah, blah time. We're in the kitchen for 10 minutes. I'm going to set that timer. And then I'll say, I will follow whatever script you want me to. That way, you are actually not denying her, but you're doing it in such a way that it actually will not be reinforcing for her. And then it gives you kind of permission to say no at any other time. The payoff in that whole ritual is that it happens under her control, when and where and how she wants. So when you pull away those maintaining variables and you have that habit under your control in a way, you know, you're giving her a little control over it, but really your control, you're setting the boundary, it takes the teeth out of it, makes it less, it's now, she probably won't even want to do it. But you're going to have to stick with it. You cannot follow her lead. You have to identify what it is. You have to set the stage for it and say, okay, this time in this place, give her a little control over that, not too much, and then sit down with her at the table and say, okay, now, and you let her do it and the timer rings, now you're done. So you've set a very clear boundary around that ritual. It takes, I have to tell you, it's like it pulls away the strength of it and starts to chip away at it. It's a wonderful technique for that. And I would give that a try. And then you can always email me and ask any questions, or like, wait, this came up, I'm not sure, you know, how this should look, or she said this or she did that. Now, she will probably not like it. She's not just going to go along with it. But what you have to let her know is this is how I'm going to interact with you, but this is how it's going to be.
Okay. So when she starts asking her questions when she gets off the bus,
well, you have to prepare her ahead of time.
Okay,
so
talk to her ahead.
You lay it out. You say, you know that talk thing we do, like maybe the night before, you know what, Elena, you know that talk thing we do when you get off the bus? Okay, I don't mind doing that, but we're going to make an appointment for it so that I can give you, and I would be a little sneaky, you know, I would say, so I can give you my full attention. You don't want to say so we can get rid of the habit, okay? You want to say, we're going to do it. I want to be able to give you my full attention, so we're actually going to make an appointment for it. You tell me,
okay.
Do you want it to be at 3:30 to 3:40? Do you want it to be from 4 to 4? You give her some choices that way, and like you set the time, and then I'm all yours, and I'll say it whatever way you want. But outside of that time frame, I'm not going to be able to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and she's going to get off the bus, and she's going to go into it. That's where your patience and self-control and strength, knowing that the behavior may get worse before it gets better. She won't like it. Now, let me just give you a scenario. Let's say she goes into a rage over it, even though you prepared her, okay? She wants it when she wants it, and she goes into a rage. And you ride through that horrible thing. I'm sure you've been through them before. But then, at the appointed time, I want you to go to the place that you guys designated, whether it's the kitchen table or whatever. I want you to say, I'm here for our talk time now. Even if she had a big rage over that you didn't do it when you wanted, you need to show her that you said it and you meant it. We're having our ritual talk, and so you go there. She will not, I can kind of tell you, she won't go over there, because the whole point is that she wants to be in control of that. But you go over there anyway, because you need to show your credibility. I'm here, I'm ready to go over those things with you now. This was our time, remember? Whatever she does, ride through that. Typically, they give up the whole thing, because if it's not done the way they want, they don't want to do it at all. I'm just saying that happens. That happened with my own kid when I set something up, but that's happened with other clients. However, some kids will do it. They will make that appointment, and they'll do it on the parameter. It doesn't matter. If she gives it up, great. The key is that you're not telling her you're not going to do it, but you're controlling it and limiting it to such a degree that it no longer has the power that it has.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I'll definitely try it. I think I can put a plan together with that. And just a side note, like, this truly did not happen until she was older. And it's more than just verbal. It's her, like, she has to put her tennis shoes exactly, they have to be untied and on the same step and position the same way. It's like little things like that. It's not every aspect of her life, but it's.
Well, we can talk about
items.
personally, if you want to have a conference call, we can talk about other OCDs, but the verbal ritual is one that involves you so much
It's the worst.
that right. So that's the one I would start with, and I would do that about stimulus control around it. There are other techniques for other OCDs. Just a side note is, I had mentioned how my son has Tourette's and all that. OCD was the main, yes, he had the tics, but the OCD was what was the huge problem in our lives. I mean, it's a very frustrating thing. I know what it's like I just want you to understand, I know what it's like to live with OCD. And yes, you never completely get rid of it. You really can. There is no cure for it, but there are ways to manage it and limit it. That's there are ways to kind of handle it. There's not a way to fully just get rid of it. And there aren't even medications that get rid of it. But I can assure you, there are ways to deal with it that help. So we can,
And is that typical that it happens later as they develop?
Well, it can even happen in adulthood. Yeah, no, it is. It can. The thing about OCD is it's not a developmental disorder. Like it's not like ADHD or other developmental, like autism. It's a condition that can arise even in adulthood.
Okay.
Did she have a seizure or anything?
She doesn't have any seizures.
She doesn't have seizures.
AHC, yeah.
I know she has that. But sometimes with OCD, there's a triggering event.
I don't. We had a very rough 8th grade, and it seems like after that it happened. We had bad support poor support at school. We battled this district at that time. I had to change school. So it was just a rough year, just in general.
So think of it this way.
Maybe that's it, because it was right after that.
Alice, we have 15 minutes left. I just want to make sure you're aware.
Okay. And I would say that it was probably it was probably stress induced is probably what.
I'm going to try that.
Okay, thanks, Jen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think it's, is it Mace? I am a mother of a 14-year-old boy. You there? You're unmuted.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. Can you hear me?
No, I'm not hearing anything.
I can read your question. Can you hear us?
I can hear Bill. I can only hear Bill.
Okay.
Okay, I'll read the question real quick.
Can you hear me now, please?
I can hear it.
We
Now
can hear you.
Yeah, now I can.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a mother of a 14-year-old boy who has AHC and or ACH, sorry. And we had difficulties with his behavior before, but now things are okay. But the problem is the disorder comes like 6 months ago. He has more disability, so this make him more aggressive, and he has more negative feelings. And now we are controlling this. But later on, what I can expect for this disease or in the future, does his case will be worse, so he will feel again he's more disabled than before? And before he can walk properly, now he can't. He can move his hands, now he can't. One of his hands is not moving, so this make him feel so negative between his friends and family.
Okay. So so let me tell you what I can and cannot answer. I'm not the MD, so I can't answer what the course will be, and I'm not going to answer that. But what I can help you with is emotional side effects of his condition. And there really isn't, I mean, there's not, sugar water here. There's no really great way to manage what is a genuine, difficult, horrible situation that he's coping with. But what you can do, it's the only thing you can do, is work with him. And I'm going to sidestep here. You may want to get a really good cognitive behavioral therapist too, because you want to work with him in being able to focus on the things that he can do. And often technology is a good avenue for people who have worsening physical disabilities. There's so much technology out there with the computer that getting him, often we say the kids are too tech addicted, but in his case, I think using technology to connect with people, to maybe even learn a skill through the computer would be something to focus on. So what your search is, what are the things that he can do that are kind of motor free, that will help him feel connected socially, and possibly even in terms of an interest of his. The only way that people can manage emotional side effects of disability, pain, chronic illness is by getting focused on something that really clicks in as far as their interest. And you don't want them isolated. So luckily, I mean, in many ways, I don't like the whole social media thing, but to tell you the truth, for people with motor impairments, it can be a huge blessing because they can often be equal. They can be on an equal footing socially in many ways. And so I would probably focus more on the opportunities through tech with him. And I would also get him hooked up with a cognitive therapist, because that whole thing of accepting what is really an unacceptable situation, that's going to take professional therapeutic intervention. But as I say, as a parent, from the parent side of it, I would be really searching for any interest he has. Does he have any kind of interest? Animals, race cars? I mean, what are his interests?
Actually, he liked reading books, and he liked to use social media and sending messages to his friends, because when he had some disability in writing, because he was writing in his left hand and it was totally disabled, we tried to move to the right hand, so he find it more easier to type on the mobile or on the computer than using the pen or pencil to write.
How is his voice? Can he talk?
Yes, he go to school. Actually, he can speak, okay, but not as a 14 years old child.
Well, but if he can talk, then you can use voice output. He doesn't have to use his hands to write, is what I'm saying. Like, if his speech is intelligible at all, they now have some really good voice output. It used to be where you had to speak really clearly, but now they do have some new technology where he may be able to be hands-free, is what I'm saying, as far as expressing himself. So that's an avenue, and I do think that getting him hooked up with tech and looking at all of his interests. Reading is fantastic, and there's a subject matter that he likes to read more. Getting him hooked in with people who share that interest, getting him onto tech, I think that's going to be a very positive thing in his life. That it's not going to erase the frustration and feelings of depression and anxiety and loss. It's not going to erase it, and that's why I say I think he should have a therapist. But I think it'll be a huge help to him.
Yeah, that's great. But sometimes when he has the case or the matter goes on, he lost his voice. For that, he's too much annoyed for this case, because he can't express himself, he can't move, he can't speak. In this case, and it stays for about between minutes to 1 hour like this. and then he goes back, his sound comes back and everything. During this, I can call it seizure matter or something.
Yeah.
He feels very depressed, and he start sometimes trying to scream or something, but his voice can't come up, so this makes him very disappointed.
So I'm thinking that what you might want to do is, in that it's kind of a predictable thing, you might want to give him a sequence to go by, like a relaxation sequence. Again, where do you live?
I live in Jordan, and I've been reading a lot. Actually, we are newly know this kind of disease because before all doctors, they mentioned that this is epilepsy, so there was a wrong.
Oh, they misdiagnosed it. Yeah, they
diagnosed.
So what I would suggest, first of all, I do suggest you go to a cognitive behavior therapist. Why? Because when he is having that experience, what we want to teach him is to go into a sequence where he learns relaxation, so that at least he can kind of cope with that a little bit better. He doesn't know what to do. What you're describing is sort of a panic reaction, panic and rage. Totally understandable. But it would help to set up or to shape, if he knows it's predictable, to kind of shape a sequence, a relaxation sequence, until he gets that response back, till whether it's an hour later or even longer. It's that interim where he panics. He goes into a panic reaction. So I would treat it almost like a panic, like you know how people will have panic attacks.
Yeah.
He has to learn. Okay, so he would have to learn, and he needs to have a therapist helping him with that. I would tell the therapist, we're really looking for how to deal with a panic attack related to when he's having an episode. He goes into panic, which the way that it manifests is rage, right? Mm-hmm. So what we want him to do is, when he gets those early signs, we want him to be able to follow a relaxation sequence so that he can get through that episode until he can kind of regain that control. That's how I,
okay.
if you
we're gonna have to, we got some more, Alice.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Alice, there's multiple people that asked the same question, so I'm just going to try to word it a little differently. So it's basically, you learn how to teach and train your child with some of the techniques that we have learned from you, but then there's other people in our circle of influence, family members, who don't follow the same process and kind of reinforce negative behaviors that we've been fighting for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to, but there's about 3 or 4 people that ask that same question. So what's the best way, besides maybe we're going to publicize this video, that all parents and all friends, families, cousins, whoever's, connected to the child can watch this. But at the same time, what do you think is a good suggestion for everybody?
Well, that's hard because everybody has different relations with their family, and those can be pretty complicated. So obviously, influencing your family to do the right thing. I would actually maybe even have a business card kind of thing. They do this with autism, where on the back of a card, it kind of tells you, this is the intervention we're working on. Please do the following, like, please stay out of it, please let me handle it. It may look scary, or it may look like we're not doing anything. Usually family members, they intervene because they want to help, usually. Now, that's not always the case with certain family dynamics, so it's hard to answer it universally, but I'm going to give a couple of things. So if the family is well-meaning, but they're intervening where it's not helpful, I would certainly let family members know that my child, we're working on a behavior plan, and the plan may look like we're not doing anything, or it may look like we're doing the wrong thing. But it's really important that when I, give you the signal, that you let us handle it. That's just giving them the information. And it's also letting them know that this may look odd. This is what we do in the school, because even in a school, you have a child in the hallway and we're dealing with, it looks like we're ignoring a behavior when in fact it's part of a plan. Your family members may feel like if you're doing that shutdown, they may feel like you don't know what to do. So they want to help, and they help by catering or by giving in or reasoning. So you do have to kind of publish the fact that that's not what we're doing. And I would actually have a card made up that you can hand them. Because when your child is in a rage burst, it's really important that one person is the leader and deals with it, and the people who don't know what's going on don't add their 2 cents, because it can really wreck what you're doing. So I would actually have a little card. I used to have them for autism. This child, it may look odd to you, but we are doing we're following a plan. We will let you know when it's okay to talk to the child. So you kind of let them know. If you have family members, though, that disagree and they're actually sabotaging you, you may want to limit your exposure, under certain circumstances. Like, you may not want to be with family members under the conditions where your kid may be challenged, where behaviors may come up, where you could predict this is going to be tough and we're going to have family members that are into sabotage. Well, that may not be a time where you want to include your child in that.
We got about 4 minutes left. I just want to make sure. So those are the 2 options are: tell them there's a plan involved, or stop talking to them. Is basically okay. Just making sure. You want to make sure. Okay. All right. Okay, Karen Vente, if you want to ask a question, I'm gonna let's see. Is your name?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks so much for the presentation. Especially, I really like the thing on the verbal issues with OCD type thing, which my daughter is now doing it about snow days and weather. I just can't stand it. But I do have a quick question on the technology you mentioned, because my daughter is very verbal, but she has articulation issues, and the longer she talks, the slower she gets because of the AHC and the dystonia. And she has a real hard time with like a Siri or something like that, where your articulation has to be a little crisper.
Yeah.
Is there anything else out there?
I think I'm not a real great tech gal, but I have somebody that I can ask. So Karen, why don't you email me, and I'm going to try to contact that tech person, because and her name, you might be able to Google her. It's like, okay, I know her real well, but what is her name? Bridget Nicholson.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's really good at things like that. And what she is good at, working with kids with cerebral palsy, with their voice output. And that is, those kids are very hard to understand sometimes. I feel like she is a really good resource. I'm not the best person for tech questions, but I often know people who are. So I would say her name is Bridget Nicholson. She's like an OT, but she got into using tech for kids with disabilities. And I think that might be your best resource.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Couple minutes left. Does anybody have anything pressing they want to ask? Feel free to raise your hand or pop offline.
Question. I've been asking this for a couple of years, because my daughter is now 18, 164 pounds, and she really didn't have any behavior issues when she was younger, but she does now. And she's also quite intelligent, and sometimes she has rages that are clearly AHC in nature, and then other times it's fairly clear that they're behavioral. But with aggression, we haven't been able to find any place that will kind of give us techniques to use when she's aggressive that keeps her safe and us safe. And it seems to be the nature of the business. They'll train your schools and your school staff, but because of liability, they say they won't train parents. At least that's what I found.
Have you looked into safety care?
I'm not familiar with that particular name, safety
well,
care.
The reason I like the safety care is that they do follow the behavioral recommendations. They're more behavioral than a CPI kind of thing. And they're national.
Okay.
Okay. So it's called Safety Care. Quality, it's QBS is the mother company, I think. And they will, they can train, they have a parent training as well as for schools.
That's what I
And
mean.
it can show, yes, you need safety. You need ways to keep her safe, and yourself as well. And that's the kind of blocking and restraint and that kind of thing it's very tricky. So I'm glad that you're looking for a company. I would recommend that one in particular because that's what they're geared for,
Sure.
as opposed to CPI. Yeah, it's true. That is a very tricky thing. Do you have a safe place? Like, can you teach her to go to a safe place and then highly reward that?
Well, we haven't been able to. What she likes to do, what happens, and you can just see like a glaze come over her eyes. I mean, it really seems so neurological but she tends to want to, she won't let you go anywhere. So she's either going to grab or keep you. I mean, we did 45 minutes of her trying to step on my feet. And I just sat down and just kept moving my feet. But by 45 minutes, she was bent in half. She was saying, I'm dizzy. You need to stop moving your feet. I mean, I was trying to not escalate, but she couldn't stop. And she just wanted to step on my feet. But when she stepped on my feet, she was getting off balance. And we were in a small area. I had no cell phone and no one in the house. And I was afraid she was going to go backwards and hurt herself. I couldn't get her to stop. And so I just kind of wrote it out. And I got hit a couple of times. I got smacked. I got a ripped shirt, whatever. I tried very hard to just not escalate. And
I think that's rough. But I think at that point where you're kind of stuck, you can't remove yourself because she may not be safe. Then you're going to need to learn safety care, safe restraint methods. And there are some that we use where the person is larger than you. They'll kind of tell you, I was trained in safety care, and there are techniques that they say, don't use this or do use this if the person is bigger than you.
Yeah,
so
cleaning her actually just makes it worse. It's blocking her. It's really just kind of trying to just de-escalate or not give her something. If someone's in the house and I can remove myself to my room, I will, and lock the door.
Right.
Still just kick it so someone can divert her. But that's what we use. That's the technique. And it doesn't happen often, but it happens.
What's the technique you use?
Well, if someone else is in the house with me, I can remove, and I can remove myself quickly. I will lock myself in my bedroom.
Yeah.
But she'll kick the door, and then say if my husband's in the house, then he'll try, writing messages on paper, yes, no questions, sometimes.
Right.
Okay,
I like that method. Yeah, because that's kind of like the distractor prompt, where you're distracting that behavior. You're distracting her focus. You're kind of interrupting her the chain and getting her to shift. That if you can do that, great. But if she's just if you're in a situation where she's just not able to control that and it's dangerous, then you have to know safety. You just have to know how to physically keep her safe and you safe. But I actually like the idea of the texting. Sometimes, kids have phones even, you can do texting.
Yeah.
And they it's like the phone ringing thing. It's a distractor prompt, which is very helpful. So I actually think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Great. Well, I will look these resources
look up safety care.
Thank you.
I'm sorry you have to go through this.
Yeah, it's not too often, and she's great. She's so great on the other end, but it happens. So
that's tough.
Okay, Alice. Congratulations.
Oh, is that it? You got through the test.
Everybody's gonna get to bed.
Okay, Bill, you know what I'm most proud of? The fact that I remember to take out this ear thing, this cord when I played the videos.
Even the teacher can be trained. Is that unbelievable? See how that works? Huh? So I actually went to Alice's seminars during the AHC, and I listened to her. So all I did was use her techniques on herself when I was training her, and it worked perfectly well.
Good for you. It worked. All right.
All right, everybody. We will. This is all going to be saved on video. We will upload it with a special link to a website on our website. And if there's other people, family members, or friends, or school teachers, all that type of stuff that want to watch it, that's great. And then we'll try to summarize it. Alice will have an email address we'll put up there for you. And if you want to reach out to her directly, obviously you can do that too.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Happy
Thanks.
Thursday, everybody.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Alice.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.